Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jennifer Franklin, and I'm the program director of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I am thrilled to have you with us tonight as we celebrate the online launch of Lisa Olstein's incredible new collection, Dream Apartment, Copper Canyon 2023, with special guest Diane Seuss. You know you're doing something right when Lisa Olstein reaches out to ask if she can launch her new book as part of the Hudson Valley Writers Center reading series. If this is your first time joining us for a reading, welcome. We hope you continue to come to our online readings, classes, and events. Please check out our website for the complete list of offerings. We hope some of you will return to the center for our next in-person reading on Saturday, October 7th, as we welcome Rachel Haddis, Walter and Caro, and Patrick James Errington in from Scotland. The next Zoom-only reading will be Sunday, December 10th, as we focus on translation, including poems translated by Arthur Z. I want to thank Hudson Valley Writers Center founder, Margot Taft-Stever, the board, our teachers and students who are the beating heart of the center. We also want to recognize the foundations and organizations who support us, including the Bidell Foundation, the David G. Taft Foundation, NISCA, and Arts Westchester. I also want to thank my colleagues, Sophia Bannister, Misty Yarnell, who's co-hosting with me tonight, and Christina Papadopoulos for all of their hard work. So I'm just going to give you the two brief bios for Lisa and Diane, and then I'm going to welcome Diane to introduce Lisa. Lisa Olstein is the author of 5 poetry collections published by Copper Canyon Press, most recently Late Empire and Dream Apartment, out just yesterday from Copper Canyon. She has also published 2 nonfiction books and is the recipient of many awards, including the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Lannan Writing Residency Fellowship, Pushcart Prize, Hayden Carruth Award, Sustainable Arts Fellowship, and Writers League of Texas Book Award. She's part of the poetry faculty at the University of Texas at Austin, where she teaches in the MFA program and the Writers Project. She earned a BA from Barnard and an MFA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Reading The Miraculous Dream Apartment is akin to taking a master class in how a collection in 7 sections with different forms, themes, and styles can work together to form something greater than the sum of all its parts. These remarkable poems are original, they take risks, and they utterly captivate the reader. As a poet, one of my favorite comments to receive after someone reads my book is that it makes them want to sit down immediately to write. That is how I felt the 2 times I read Dream Apartment. It is a wonder. Diane Seuss, as you know, needs no introduction. She's the author of 6 books of poetry. Her most recent collection is Frank Sonnets from Grey Wolf Press in 2021, which won many awards, including the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Pulitzer Prize. Her 6th collection, Modern Poetry, is forthcoming from Grey Wolf Press in March 2024 and is available already to pre-order now. Misty is putting the links for both of these books in the chat for you tonight. Seuss was a 2020 Guggenheim Fellow. She received the John Updike Award from the Academy of American Arts and Letters, and she was raised by a single mother in rural Michigan, which she continues to call home. She lives with a rescue dog, Stella, whose eyes look into your very soul. By this time, we all know how unique and rare Diane Seuss's poetry is, but what you may not know is what a supportive literary citizen she is and how dedicated to community building she is, especially for writers who have not yet had the same level of recognition that she has. She has been such a friend to my work and to the work that goes on here at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Diane is rare in many ways, and we're lucky that she's going to share poems with Lisa here tonight. Please help me welcome Diane Seuss.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction of both of us. You guys, I'm going to read just a few short poems to kind of, I'm like the appetizer, and then I'm going to do an introduction of Lisa and especially of this book. And then we get to hear Lisa, which is like what it's all about. Um, all right, so this is the first poem in my next book. It's called Little Fugue State. Far have I wandered, not knowing the names of where. Long have I woven this dress of human hair. Here I have pitched my tent, here and there, not knowing my name or where, not even the color of my hair, nor why it tangles so, nor where my comb goes, nor where my brush, how far I wandered through underbrush into onrush, nor where my body was, nor what it called itself, nor the nature of my calling, nor what my scrawling meant. Not that scrawl then, nor this scrawl here, nor what a self could be, nor what a bee could be, nor breath, nor poetry. This dog I've walked and walked to death. This is called monody, and it's kind of another word for lament. Kindness, like enthralling madness after shock treatments, is first to go. In the past, I snapped the bean's spines, aware that something died so I could thrive. But this emptiness makes even a nightingale consumable. As for the song and red tail feathers, take them here. I just don't care. To grieve is a dilettantish stand-in for the subject of my grief. What I'm saying is the verb is a canned performance of the missing noun. Or I'm saying I don't know how to feel anymore. Use metaphor, but don't adhere to her. As more than once I was used, but not adored. And I'll just read a couple of real short poems. These are new since I finished modern poetry. I nearly died from the Socratic method. I nearly died from the Socratic method of dying, from hemlock, unbeknownst to me in my garden. Unbeknownst, I picked a pretty hemlock bouquet, mistaking it for wild carrot, inhaling enough of its noxious powders to drop a donkey, but not a god, and not a philosopher who must drink it as a potion from a cup. A poet, who knows, who can claim to be a poet? My Socrates told me never make that claim. It paints you as a hot dog, a pea brain. Nonetheless, I sickened from the bouquet, my legs heavy, my lungs flimsy and sad. On the third day, I rose and returned to the garden where I snipped a rose. Unbeknownst, a thorn snagged me, and another, and another. And this will be my last. My hair, oh, the color of a field mouse. Its texture, dust ball. My body, a world of massive disappointments. And I quote, I didn't realize your stomach would pooch over your two-piece, unquote. said at the beach when I was 16 by my teacher. That was the year dead alewives washed up on shore in droves. If they were coins, I would have been rich, capable of liposuction and Miss Michigan. In this passion play, the body is Judas, fat and misunderstood. In the mirror, its eyes are increasingly dead fish. How did Jesus keep his girlish figure? Poverty, walking barefoot, writing parables in his head and getting flogged. His was a starvation diet. Bread, dates, olives. A turtle dove when he was lucky. Thanks for listening. And now to the main event. I first met Lisa's poetry by recommendation of a student. He was the kind of person who tucks their hands inside the cuffs of their sweaters, so I trusted his judgment. Over time, Lisa and I slid our hands out from the sleeves of our sweaters and reached out to each other. In fact, I learned that Lisa is generous in her reaching, both in life and in writing. She takes on subjects like embodied pain and climate grief, not only because they are up for her, but on behalf of the rest of us. I can't wait to hear her read tonight, but I want to just briefly talk about this book in particular. Lisa writes with what I am going to call a sonic vulnerability. Generating spare, inventive music takes guts. Listen to this in Dream Apartment's second poem, Rabbit, Rabbit. Tourniquet etiquette is a way of not bleeding through the cloudy bandage of each drumming day. I hear the rhyme of rabbit with itself in the poem's title, and the near rhyme later of rabbit, tourniquet, and etiquette. I encounter the double mirrors in the title and in bleeding and bandage, tourniquet, and etiquette. This preps my ear and then my whole body for the images therein. What is tourniquet etiquette? Well, not only how to apply a tourniquet, I guess, but how to apply it correctly. Correctly? But we're bleeding here, bleeding through the cloudy bandage of each drumming day. The day drums. How? In your heart beat, the pain in your forehead and temples, your brain, your spirit. How do we staunch the bleeding so we don't bleed through the cloudy bandage of the day? Do we want to staunch it? Or shall we defy tourniquet etiquette and go ahead and hemorrhage? A later poem in the collection ends, rabbits, it hurts. In Dream Apartment, the poem is the tourniquet that holds, but barely. From the first narrow fellow in the grass poems in the book's opening section, we encounter a rare degree of formal integrity and ingenuity. Each section ushers in a shift in formal approach because the pressure of Lisa's subjects requires it. The pain of grief in all of its incarnations and the pain of pain. A sequence written in the chevron shape arrows me open. Lisa elucidates grief in such a way that the poem holds the grieved afore with all due preciousness, like a small egg in the hand, but also with a kind of distance, like a portrait of a woman holding a small egg in her hand. Her poems love and lose with complex adult gradation. There is no how-to for poems like these. They enact the nearly impossible genius of remaining a sentient human animal, a sentient rabbit, and to live in the dream apartment, where solitude and music and form sublime architecture reign. Thank you, Lisa, for this book. I'm so excited to hear you. This is Lisa Olstein.
Di, thank you for that incredible attention and those incredible poems. I think we might have just gotten like a world premiere of some new work, which is a serious occasion. As Jennifer alluded to, Diane is not only one of our essential and most brilliant, provocative, innovative, wondrous contemporary poets, but she is an extraordinary literary citizen. She brings together communities, and she's also just a incredible source. If you follow her on social media, you will encounter paintings and poems and all kinds of other things that will honestly enrich your life. So I recommend that. And I can't thank you enough for being part of my poetry community and for joining me here tonight. Thank you so much, Jennifer and Misty and the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I'm so happy to be doing this here with you tonight. I have a couple sort of so-called invisible disabilities, including immune dysfunction. And so having some Zoom events continue is a really wonderful thing. I venture out into the world, but I also really appreciate that not everybody can, or not everybody can all the time. So thank you for that as well. As Diane said, and Jennifer really eloquently, and far more eloquently than I will right now, this is largely a book of form. I found myself, after publishing 2 books of nonfiction prose, really kind of falling into form with a lot of relief in that return, in terms of all of the many craft elements and sort of sensual elements that poetry has to offer in terms of line and sound and all those things. And form became really a vessel to contain what might otherwise sort of threaten to overflow, something that pressed back and offered shape, but also a vessel in terms of like a ship that you travel or journey with. So there's some long poems, there's some actually shaped poems, which was a real surprise to me. Never much of a fan of concrete poetry, but then lived long enough, I guess. I'm going to read a handful of poems from 2 primary forms that the book takes up. The first little group of poems, maybe 4 or so, are from these single stanza, really narrow, highly enjammed, very lightly punctuated poems that, to me, they're like a Jacob's ladder. They tumble and cascade. Do you remember that toy? It's like a little wooden set of blocks, and they just tumble down. So I'll read some of those, and then I'm going to read some sort of chattier, more sort of lyric narrative, associatively driven poems that are in couplets, which is a form I'm devoted to, and which has more to do with sort of the skipping and looping and movement of the mind and unself-conscious thought, I hope. So I'll read for 15-ish minutes or so, if my test run was accurate. And then I don't want to brag or scare you, but Di has offered or promised to interlocute the hell out of me. So then we'll do that. Okay, thanks again. Thanks so much for being here. Fortnight. The snake is a sleeve the deer puts on its mouth, a beaded cuff in the haze men make of morning with each release of their fist-gripped guns. Is this a dream of shame? Is this a dream of potential unmet, of possibility undone? School, no pants. Brush, no teeth. Podium, no poems. Open door, all wall. Dear monster, none of the guests we invited arrive. In the darkness, no lion comes. Root. God made her his vessel. No. God made of her a vessel. No. The river poured into her as if a vessel. Yes. God made of her a raft. No. Her child clung to her as if a raft. No. Clung to her as a raft. Yes. God made of her a vassal. Yes. Landless, river pastured, root cut loose. Kiss. It's true. I rue. I tore myself apart for you, and you loved to watch me do it, loved to watch me crack my hips like a whip, toss myself skyward, seeding thunder to the clouds. It's the brain that feels the pain. It's the body that delivers it. Horse. I became his horse, meaning for a minute there, I looked promising, like a winner might. Just maybe he could drive me someplace special, someplace he wanted to go, or I was already there, or if not quite closer than, he was just then, and so valuable or vaultable. Either way, hurry up and neigh. Apparent winner. Once the moon came close, brushed its rough cheek to my face, but before my eyes could adjust to the light spilling gas-like, it was retreating again into a more distant orbit. Is this where I go when I don't want to hear the news or what passes for its fevered breath? Did I earn this morning's calm? No, that's the medicine I took to stop the thoughts, realistic enough, but impossible with which to sleep. A real-life boogeyman followed me home last night, one woman, 2 children, down my own dark street. Later, something about the way with her bare hands the chef on TV caressed the naked inside of the slaughtered sow, made watching its body come apart into cuts all right, except for the head, because the line drawn in me is apparently the thoughts. I don't want to take another being's life force for my own if I don't need to, is what I said to my mother over the phone after communing with an aunt late on a different long ago night. I was beautifully high. All the neighborhood cats had come out to see me, but still I had to eat, and so I ate. And since I could, I ate well. Let's not make this about petty differences. Certain suffering limited my options. There's so much suffering. Sometimes I cause it. Sometimes I have no choice but to let it suckle at my breast, my pinky in a pinch. It's so hungry. Why are you such a bad person? Too often I find myself wanting to say, also, I love you. The toddler wearing a leash designed to look like a backpack so his mother might feel less self-conscious has brought his horse figurines to see the horses in their muddy pasture on the other side of the soft-edged fence today. I watch them through the window of this country vet waiting room as a burly man carries his sick dog in, and I look for them again when he carries his dead dog out. But this time, all I count is vulture, vulture, sparrow, hawk, until the tech taps my arm and says, you can take your cat. Rabbits make an uncanny number of appearances in this book. I can't defend or explain it, nor do I want to. But here are some. Blue is the room in the house we don't use. Thank God you're still here beats the heart to the beloved turbulence of living air. Wolf spelled, I can't tell the swallows from the landlady's shadow until she laughs, and I think, crow, crow. Ivory caskets in the moonlight, creatures of what comforting alarm before dawn, what familiar distress in the undress of weeded lawns. Here is a flock of peonies, ants still blissful in their sticky cling of buds. Sometimes when I make a mistake, I repeat it to be sure. That hurts. Yes, try again. Where I might have chosen power, many days I chose kindness, and many days have been filled with regret. A cat will eat you disdainfully, it is said, but how is it better for a dog to starve beside you instead? So little of us edible, arable in the end, but I confess, I've only ever wanted to swallow my dead, only the closest, only to hold them closer still. Rabbits, my doctor is my nurse. She tells me not to watch the news anymore. In this, she echoes the advice I give myself, but I hold it against her anyway. Rabbits, it hurts. Come, calamity. Render tender the shoots of evening, let us in the lettuce light, fitful as fish, pumping fistfuls of razored air, jagged saws, tisk tisk, cut cut. Gleaners in the gloaming, fuck that, I was starving and far too far from any lavender heroics. There's a moment when you realize the beloved baby's milky paste has long since turned to shit. Another when the smell of any man fills the closed-off room. Many a time called in by dark, called in by storm, I knew full well who it was I comforted. Little other breathing, nothing to do but shape myself around you like a shell in the ordinary night. Host. Frozen at the sword-tipped castle gates of will I, I grew my meager garden, flicked worms from wasting stalks, my failing stock stored deep in the mud's pantry. The tide beyond the moat was beyond reach, but waves move air to ear, and slowly, slowly, they reached me. The tide was people. The people were bodies already and about to be. Masked, gowned, stripped, wrapped, latched, gasped, towed. Anchor split and filling like estuaries, chambers ill-lit, attic attacked, small fires spreading everywhere and all the wrong blankets. Who feasts this feast day? Not I. What us? How thus? Via touch of my own hand, via droplet laden, via particles free. Doubling time versus half-life. Consider letting one hand become contaminated while trying to keep the other clean. Tick, tick, the slick whip riding herd in the stormy terrain of the brain. Knock, knock, who's there? The wind, the weed, the drought, the deluge. A crack in each cell's armor, a kink in their chain. What sorrow barge docks overnight? What surge will dirge the shore of us? When will its eye pass through me? What will I see? Having not much, I try to want for less. Quiet as a mouse now, soft as a rabbit. More barren, this not winter grows its fortress of tawny husks. Blood thistle, bent bristle, I grow smaller in each night's sick light. An ember easily spun round by the whirlpool any good fire exhales until everything unimaginable breaks again on the sun-splashed rock of another living day, and out I go on the occasion of a cloud. So rare, any moisture in the air, any cool hand smoothing its blue brow. Wind, whittle me, how I've missed your soft blades. How many days since, how many days till? How will we hold these losses? With both hands? Ways and means. A divine spark from an ocean of fire lights up the vast night in you. You're dragging something, the past. This pathway is open, that pathway is closed. Destiny, karma, contracts, who knows? All of your lifetimes? Go to the space behind your eyes that has to do with winter. Who knows all of your lifetimes? There is your despair. Bless it with the spark. the spell. The lover who punished me, the sea wasp that stung me, the mold that bloomed behind the walls that housed me, the evil eye cast by a rival to expel me, the love, gold as any honey, hived around me, the pills I took, the pills I didn't take, the doctors, the needles, the vials, the scripts, the whirring, the silence, the sputtering engines of my cells, the years, the spell I want to cast across them. Event horizon. Today's hard green fruit latched along the ledge, the length of each small branch, tells me there was a flowering I missed or moved too quickly by to see or saw, and let pass through the net memory casts over the day for the mind to sort through later, dreaming. Loquat, what? Mulberry, okay. Tomorrow's 9 months since you stopped your ticking clock. What I most can't stand to see is your body coming at me in pictures, sunny porches, golden necks, arched a little in laughter, saying nothing about what we did and didn't know. This morning, astronomers confirmed with a telescope called Event Horizon something about relativity, capturing the first ever images of an actual black hole, 53 million light years away and 1.5 light days across. Light days. Is there anything more beautiful? Event horizon. A region in space-time beyond which events cannot affect an outside observer, or the point of no return, or the boundary at which gravity's pull becomes so great, there's no escape. Hello, brother. Did you walk out the front door of yourself, stunned magnolia in the hailstorm? Nurse nerves first fled down a tunnel of false fountains marking the route. Too often, the snapshots parading across my dreams are stock characters of a forgettable day, but last night, finally, you came through, dead but whole, cheerfully turning knobs, looking for the door you were meant to enter, fern and conch mathematics, vestibular, auroral. This morning, once again, all America has one son, the chorus sings, because finding he could not run, a boy threw himself through a tunnel of air to tackle the nightmare, nightly, a mare, in whose line of sight he found the breath of his life standing. But sons are not interchangeable, and no love is like any other. The what of you, the here, the sway. And I'll close with one last poem, To Flee the Kingdom. So spring today, bees in the bok choy bolted yellow before we could eat it. Let them eat it instead. Let them carry on, carrying its stardust from place to place. Let us all eat, come, future, come. Meanwhile, the cat gives a good long bath. The birds will fill whatever gap left them. Once we didn't name them out of abundance. Now we don't name them out of respect for their loss, ours. Hawks or whales, jaguars, anacondas. You've met yourself in the place you were afraid. You're smart, you keep your head, you've got the right stone. When you really look, the enemy is not as it first appeared. It's actually more dangerous if the horse doesn't know what you want, says the woman out front. I am the shining lotus on top of the tallest mountain in the world, breathes the bay beneath her. Steady on. Thanks.
Oh, that was so good. Thank you. What's it feel like after you read poems like those?
Ooh. I don't know. It's such an interesting sort of dichotomy that we are always working within, sort of a deep solitude, and then this sort of hope for communion, which can happen in a group, but still feels in a way very private. So I feel confused a little bit maybe after reading poems.
Yes, it is a very strange space to hold, isn't it?
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm really interested, of course, in the title of the book and the significance of dream to this book. And I wondered if you could talk about that, especially, I guess, in terms of how you generate images. Um, does each book kind of hold an image bag that you're working with? Or do images kind of stalk you through time that have never left you? How do you do it?
Well, in terms of those images, I think I think yes, stalked through time, but also stalked sort of episodically by different ones. I'm a real believer that artists and thinkers and makers of all kinds, that we're supposed to follow our obsessions or our fascinations. And so I don't try to question those or analyze them. I try to move into the energy that is somehow resonant or magnetic. And so going down rabbit holes, no pun intended. And so I think that I have gone down very different rabbit holes at different times. You know, in my second book, it was all in the voice of a obsessed, unmoored lepidopterist. Moths and butterflies haven't shown up too much since, but for a while they were all the rage for me. So
if they continued, you may have a problem.
Exactly, right? But you know, there were a few years there where I was, you know, finding every amateur moth collector who raised, you know, silkworms in their basement and wrote some pamphlet about it. That's what I was looking for. So I think that there's an episodic nature, and I'm sure there are through lines. And mostly when I'm in a generative mode, I don't try to step out and bird's eye view it. I find that it's really important to protect the space of the making, and it's a later stage, you know, when you sort of print everything out and greet it as this other thing outside of yourself and see how it talks back to you. That's where I see, oh wow, okay, there's a lot of rabbits showing up, for instance, or that kind of thing. In terms
so then are you like, oh, I better cut back on the rabbits, or are you, hey, let's go deeper?
It could go either way. I think sometimes when you're doing a little something, the problem that it's, you can either pull back, do less, or you can dig in, do more. And what has to happen is it has to translate. Whichever move you make has to somehow be convincing to another. So you don't want a reader to think like, does she know there are rabbits across 4 or 5 of these poems? Like, should I be the one to tell her? I don't think so. You know, that's embarrassing for both of us. You want to feel like you're somehow in command of it, even if originally it was unintentional, I suppose. I think the level of putting together a book is like a whole other realm of the creative process. And it's a place where we make a lot of generative choices as well. And that question of like, do you pull back or do you dig in is one of those kinds of questions. But to just answer briefly the first part of your question about the idea of a dream apartment or dreams in general. Oh, I'm so glad. I meant maybe to say this in the beginning, and I think I didn't. There were 2 kind of lodestars for me in the years of writing this work. And one is a quote from Adrienne Rich, where she says in an essay, poems are like dreams. In them, we put what we don't know we know. Which I really love. And I already was aware of my, you know, that for me, my process is discovery oriented. It's not about memorializing or articulating something that I already know or think is important. It's a discovery through language, through poetry. But the idea that, like dreams, we see things, we realize things that we didn't know we knew once they peer back at us from our poems. That was really resonant for me during this period of time. And also I think it's an offhand comment Anne Carson made once in an interview where she was talking about Greek form and her training as a classicist. And then she was talking about the contemporary mode that we're constantly kind of, coming up with what forms we want to create or inhabit. And she says, form sets the thought free, which in my mind, I always mistranslate to form invents the thought. But that feels very true to me as well. And those kinds of those ideas just sort of hover over this work a little bit. And I'm really fascinated by the idea, or not the idea, the way in which dreams themselves take up formal inhabitations. So, we're all familiar with that. You feel like you've been dreaming that poem all night, right? That you keep waking up and stopping, but then you go back to sleep and you're still dreaming that same poem, even though that's like apparently scientifically totally not what's happening. That's the feeling. So this and then. And then there are those sort of poems and dreams that kind of like are such a rush of this like intense imagery or intense occurrence. And then there's this weirdo fact that we have all these dreams in common. That, most of us have had a dream where we're in our familiar home and all of a sudden you open a door and you realize there's a whole extra wing to your house or a whole other room, in your cramped apartment. And the details are our own, but we share this form, if you will. Same is true of anxiety dreams. And there's, that little list of them in the first poem I wrote, where we don't have our teeth, or we get to school and we're not wearing pants or shirt or whatever. And while I know that it's very tricky business and none of these poems relate dreams I've had, I don't turn to dreams as an image bank or as a narrative source, but I was fascinated by them as formal entities. And that's where it comes from.
And why apartment? Why not house? Or
I don't
castle,
know.
or cave, or mansion, or
I'm sure the real answer has to do with like its syllables.
Yeah.
But also I think it comes back to the Rich quote where I think poems create these sort of unordinary realms of time and space. And I think of them as enclosures or habitats or maybe apartments. To think of it as a house, I don't know, that's a novel probably.
Yeah, an apartment has isn't going to last. You're probably not going to live there forever.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe some people have some questions, but I do have at least one more I'd like to hand you. You mentioned, well, okay, I have too many, and I want to get to the most important. I'm interested in this kind of binary between elliptical poetry that kind of veers away from clear meaning, and narrative clarity in contemporary poetry. And I'm wondering where you are along that scale. Do you worry about accessibility? Do you worry about clarity? Do you worry about your reader getting it? How comfortable are you with writing a hard poem?
I think that on the one hand, there is the potential for like a true and meaningful connection between a poem and a reader.
Mhm.
And that includes, on the one hand, like you're saying, legibility, right? Accessibility, access to the material of the poem, to the thinking of the poem. But it involves not talking down to that reader, not assuming that they need to be spoon-fed, or not assuming that your mind is much more complex than theirs.
Yeah.
Right? So you better slow
Usually
down.
it's the other way around.
Right, right. So I do think about that, and I kind of hold that in balance in a sort of Keatsian negative capability attempted way. Writing for me is very private. And so
I can feel that.
I don't think about quote unquote audience while I'm writing. I do think about, I'm trying to communicate. It all starts for me in the ear. It all has to work sonically. That's my best guide. And I can usually tell where something's failing in the ear. And I have to sort of have faith that solitary, intimate process that does feel like it's attempting to capture an energy that is moving outward, that is attempting to come to ground with other people, with smart readers. But I don't have some idea of audience with a capital A and what that audience might need, or who they might be, or how I should talk to them so that they can like get me. Because that often doesn't lead to art that I want to experience. You know, I hate it when I feel like I'm being talked down to, and I love it when art assumes I'm intelligent and gives me access to maybe something that I hadn't already concluded, right? Or hadn't already realized. And that's not because like I'm making these amazing discoveries, but because each of our minds and bodies and feelings work a little bit differently.
I do notice some questions in the chat. Jennifer, do you want to, okay. I may come back to another question. Let's just see how we do.
Right.
Well, one question that we always ask is any advice that the two of you have for people in our audience. A lot of our Hudson Valley Writers Center students are in the process of completing their first poetry manuscript. So we always like to hear that from our reading series. And then I'll also go to Austin's question. And then Di will probably have another question for you, Lisa.
Lisa, do you want to take on the advice?
Sure. I guess I would say two things. One is to trust your ear. Like if you don't already read your work out loud, I think there's a lot to gain from doing that, including reading it out loud in sequence. Your ear knows things that your conscious mind doesn't, I think. And also I feel like ordering a book is such a freighted process, especially the first time, but honestly, like it can be however many times you do it. And I think people bring a lot of pressure, like self-imposed pressure and fear. So I would say, fuck around, play with it. You're not going to break it. I think that there's this sense that we've all been given. It's almost like about voice, right? Like, oh my God, it's mystical. I have to have it. I don't know what it is. There's only like one right version of it for me. And all that does is kind of freak us out. And I think there's like a parallel thing when it comes to ordering a manuscript, as if there's one true order. And if you don't find the key that unlocks it, you will have failed, your book will fail, and etc. And then at the same time that there's almost like this idea that there's a brittleness to your work. There's not. You're not, the poems aren't going to like combust and disappear if you play around for a while. They're very malleable. So I just really believe that once you put them in proximity, they are in conversation, they are in relationship. And to learn what they might say to each other, what kinds of conversations this collection of yours can create, you have to experiment. So play around with different orders. Is there a type of order that you think would be, terrible? Like you definitely don't want it to have a narrative arc. Go ahead and do that. See what happens when you actually do the thing that you think you're going to kind of hate. And then, just try. And let it be an actual experimental process, not something that's like a concept that you try to work out separate from the work.
That's all really good. Yeah, what she said. Yeah, that's all really important. I think right now for a writer who's maybe coming to their first work or their first book, I think I have this want to say what not to do more than what to do. And one thing I would just guard against is reading too much um, for guidance. Like I think if you're reading as sort of companionship while you're working on a book, read really selectively. Find a couple of writers, whether prose or poetry, who are in there with you right now and read them. But I see this tendency to sort of feel like people feel like they have to read everything, especially contemporary stuff. And well, I'll do this like them and this like somebody else. And anything that prevents you from your own inventiveness or masks your own inventiveness, I think is dangerous. And I guess that goes equally for sort of the pressures of social media to be a certain way as a way of being a writer of poems. I feel like the best stuff comes out of your understanding of and acceptance of who you are, whatever that is. I mean, in my next book, I have a poem called My Education, which is just about how spotty my education was. And how many gaps there are in it still, and how sometimes I mispronounce shit, and always will. But in that story of how I came to meet up with poems, there's something that's just all mine. And so I guess I want to encourage whoever you are, wherever you got the urge, whatever it is and whatever it is you don't know, to rely on that, because that's your aesthetic. That's your aesthetic. That's all.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Di. And I think that, we want to be inventive, but we don't have our own idiosyncratic relationship with language. That's innate. That's human.
Yes.
It's more about uncovering it, sometimes recovering it, because it's been so buried maybe by conformity or training or who knows what.
Yes.
But it isn't like you have to invent it. You just have to allow yourself to find it.
And you do that. And the way I know you're doing that, you is when I read your poems, I'm not reading them first with my intellect or mind. I'm feeling them, and I'm feeling them very deeply. And it's an unspeakable kind of feeling. And that's how I know that you're writing out of something really old and connective and shared. And I don't think you get to that through conformity.
I think that's a really good point, Di. I feel that there are a lot of poems that people talk about today that have fierce lexical play. And that's not what you're doing, Lisa, even though your poems all sound wonderful. And you say to us today, you're leading with the sound and the sonic implications in the work, but they have such a deep emotional core. So I think I'm glad that you brought that up, Di. I'm going to go to Austin's question that we skipped over before, which was to do the student's question, which is, after 2 books of prose, Lisa, what is different in poetry for you? And Austin says, you talked about relief in falling back into form. Did the relief change form for you?
Hi, Austin. I think it just felt really palpable. And if I do say so myself, the only prose that I'm interested in writing is like quote unquote poetic prose, right? So it wasn't like I was writing, a journalistic book or anything like that. I took a lot of liberties, but I was writing in sentences that moved across, a full page most of the time. And so to mess around with stanzaic form, to mess around with enjambment, to mess around with the field of the page, for instance, it wasn't like I was discovering anything new exactly. I was just really relishing the opportunity to kind of play in what felt like a fuller range and sort of, to embrace it. It felt sort of joyful, which is, it's like you have a better, how sometimes if you've had, dinner too many times in a row with the same friends, the conversation, it isn't that exciting. But if you've been apart for a long time and you come back, it all feels kind of amazing to talk about. It was kind of like that, I think.
Yeah, when I've been away from poetry and been working on something like an essay, and then I return to poetry, it's like, this is really cool and fun and free. It's like getting out of school.
And I think a lot, so sometimes I've had the pleasure of collaborating with musicians, and it, in some weird way, I'm built to particularly love musicians. So I tend to live with them. And I have a collaboration that's called Cold Satellite. It's fronted by a singer-songwriter named Jeffrey Foucault, who's I've written lyrics for, and who has also taken my poems and made them into songs. And it's been really fascinating because I'm like, man, there are so many tools, right, that a band has to work with, right? They're going to have them. It's not just the words. It's all of these other elements, all of these sounds that are so affectively powerful, that create a mood. And sometimes it would be really funny. I would write lyrics to something that I thought was going to be like a slow, sad crooner of a song, and he would turn it into some kind of rocking thing, right? So, yeah. And in those, compared to music made by a 5-piece band or something, the page is a sort of you have to make all the music just with your choices in language. But compared to prose, poetry is that 5-piece band.
Yeah.
Right? Line, form, much more liberty. So that's how I feel.
Really, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
It might be crap, but you can do it.
Yeah. And if it works, it works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if it's crap, you don't publish it. Hopefully.
Or you do. Were there other questions? Jennifer.
Yes, we had a question for Lisa too, actually. How, if your concerns have changed over time. And the other one is, curious that you say you don't actually turn to real dreams for content in poems, and why not?
I don't have anything against dreams. And I like to really think about what is dream like. You know, and by dreamlike, I mean, sometimes we encounter an image that is so strange or unexpected, it feels like the only point of reference you have for it is like your dreamscapes. There's also that sort of dreamy, liminal kind of space that we enter into in waking life. So I'm into dreams, but I don't remember them all that well. And I have a hard time translating. When I do remember them, I actually have a hard time translating them into words. I haven't typically found that thing for me. Like, I always start with something that's happening in my ear, and poem. I mean, dream imagery that I remember. It exists in a different part of my mind. It doesn't seem to migrate over to my ear. So that's how I would answer that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was just, how have your concerns and themes changed over time across books, if they indeed have?
I think that's a hard question to answer for myself. I think that we are always inevitably bringing ourselves to the page, even when we're not trying to, like, quote unquote, tell our own stories. So, what I've experienced in my body, in my life, being a mother, not being a mother, being a well person, being a sick person, all of those things infiltrate, not just in terms of theme, but in terms of my relationship to language and my relationship to my own body and mind. So I think there's probably some evolutions and different, as I was saying before, different fascinations, that I try to give a wide berth to. And it's different to write maybe from the place of having an infant than it is to write from the place of having a teenager. So those things,
sure.
Yeah. And again, those poems may or may not be legibly about any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really different experiences to have shape your consciousness, I would say. At the same time, I think I have a lot of consistencies that show up, the intersection of the human and the natural world, the intercession of the technological and sort of surveillance type state that we're sort of ever leaning into or having imposed on us. Those are, I think, pretty consistent concerns. And then just, what does it mean to love? And how is, like, beauty and terror and love and loss, how those things are always twinned one way or another. And I think that the edges of those pairings are things that always come up for me.
Is that a good spot to close?
Yes, unless you have anything else you want to add or ask.
What do you want me to ask, Lisa?
Oh, God.
That's a good question. What's your dream question?
What haven't you gotten to say?
I feel very grateful and fulfilled right now. So,
Okay.
Yeah, thank you again so much. The great Diane Seuss, people. If we were in a room, I would imagine huge applause right now.
Oh, well.
For both of you.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited about this book. I've been kind of buried in it for a while, and I hope people read it and read it again and learn from it. I learned from it, and that's the best thing, isn't it? When you know that people are going to read it and learn, not just about how to write poems, but more than that. I often think I love and value poems so much. It's really all I've got, but they're placeholders for a larger or deeper experience. And that's the real shit.
Yeah. I stumbled upon a bookstore reading and Q&A with a contemporary philosopher by the name of Alva Noe, who I've been now quoting for a while, but he wrote a book called Strange Tools, Art and Human Nature, something like that. But my main takeaway was his statement that art is a form of essential human research.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about, getting obsessed and researching, and there's something that's just so nourishing about that and so necessary. But the art itself is research, he's saying, right?
Yeah, the process of making it and the art itself, that it's one of the ways humans understand themselves in the world, that knowledge is actually produced there. We usually think of it as to the side of those kinds of things, right? Sort of an anti-entertainment view of art, something far more central and essential to humans, which, kind of is in sync with the fact that for as long as there have been humans, there has been art, or what we would call art now, I think. So, well, Diane, thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me and letting me be part of this.
Oh, I'm so grateful to you. And Jennifer and Misty, thank you so much. And everybody who came out, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations, Lisa.
Jennifer, Misty, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad, Di, that you mentioned that it's you can learn a lot from this book. I really hope that is the case, that people will see a really interesting way for different types of poems working together in one collection in a really beautiful, interesting, enriching way. And please, all of you, since our readings are free, please do buy the books from these authors. The links are in the chat. You can pre-order Di's book that won't be out until March, but you can get Lisa's right now because it came out yesterday. So we would love you to support bookshop.org. Lisa's local bookstore is linked to the page that Misty put in the chat. So you can order both books from bookshop.org. And we really appreciate all of you being here, giving us your attention, putting questions in the chat. I will save the chat for you both so you can see what people were saying, because often when you're reading your own poems and having a conversation, you can't see what people are posting in the chat. And we will let all of the audience members know when this reading is available on our YouTube channel, but it won't be for a while because Lisa will be doing some readings and we don't want to deplete from that. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Lisa. Congratulations on this amazing book. Thank you, Di, for everything. And we hope to see all of you back here again at our next Zoom reading on December 10th. Thank you all.
Good
Good night, everybody. Thanks. Congratulations, Lisa.
Thanks, Di.
Great. Thank you, Misty. Talk to you soon.